Hi, I'm Scott Beaulier, Director of the Johnson Center for Political Economy here at Troy University and host of EconVersations. On tonight's show, we have a very special guest, a colleague of mine in the Sorrell College of Business and an Associate Dean on the Dothan, Alabama campus, Skip Ames. On tonight's show, Dr. Ames is going to talk about two of the areas he focuses a lot of his energy in the classroom and his research, ethics and entrepreneurship. Free societies require both of these, people to behave ethically and adhere to the rules of the game that are in place governing them. And certainly we need entrepreneurship to be promoting the good and desirable things that are important in a free society, things like better health care, things like new businesses, things like more goods and services that become available to people. So the entrepreneur plays a vital role in promoting prosperity, but how he behaves in a given economic environment depends greatly on the rules of the game and the ethical landscape. So we're very lucky to have you here tonight, Skip. Thanks for joining us on the set.
Thanks.
Let's get into first your background a little bit. You're a trained attorney. You practiced for a long time and then decided to come back to academia a few years ago and teach business law and business ethics down on the Dothan campus.
Right.
What inspired that change, and how's it going being back in the classroom?
Loving every minute of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really where I wanted to be even over the years of practicing law. But as a practicing attorney, one is also a teacher, because when I did jury trial work, I was always a teacher in one capacity or another. But what I wanted to do was get back into academics. I was a JAG lawyer, which is an Army lawyer, for a number of years. And I wanted to go into teaching ever since I left law school. And when I left the military, I got an LLM degree, which is an advanced law degree from Harvard. And then I taught law school for 5 years. I taught criminal law, criminal procedure, and constitutional law. And then left law school teaching and went back into private practice to get back into jury trial work. And I was a lawyer. In the latter part of my career, I was a practicing attorney with the law firm of Hand, Arundel in Mobile, doing civil defense work, which involved a lot of business cases and what lawyers call business torts. But while I was there, I taught as an adjunct at the University of South Alabama College of Business. And that was sort of the transition for me. And I retired early from my law firm. Dean Edwards and I came in contact. He's the dean of the College of Business. He and I came in contact, and here I am. So I'm back doing really what I really love doing and what I've loved doing over the years. Even while I was in practice, I instructed lawyers and business people on ethics, legal ethics and business ethics. So I'm back doing what I want to do. I'm teaching courses, doing research and writing, and I'm doing the administrative phase of everything. So it's perfect for me.
Well, it comes at a good time, because one of the big changes we're seeing in business schools and in business curriculum, driven largely by Enron and WorldCom and the mess of the early 2000s, is this return to an emphasis on ethical decision making, on classes just in ethics. Now there's a section on the CPA exams that focuses on ethics. So you're jumping back into it at a time where there's this demand for it. I guess one of my first questions for you is, how do you view the role of ethics in an organization? How does one behave ethically, but also focus on promoting the bottom line for the company, for example?
There are really a couple of questions within that question. Each and every one of us, when we go into an organization, that includes you when you came here to Troy, it included me when I went to the Dothan campus. Each one of us brings sort of our package of ethics with us. And if you try to teach that, a lot of disciplines, philosophy, political science, can teach ethical decision making, like we make decisions every day of our lives. But when you transfer that over into a college of business or a business school, then we begin to think in terms of a category called business ethics. And that really involves the question, how do you make ethical decisions within a business environment? And that's really the role of a business school. If you were taking a course in philosophy, you may take a course in ethics from a philosopher. But within a business school setting, ethics is taught more as an applied subject, and it's also taught in a way that it enables managers who will be going out of this College of Business, and enables managers to make ethical decisions within a business environment. So the focus within a business school is slightly different from the focus that you'd experience in arts and science. And having said that, within that business school focus, when you study ethics and when you study ethical decision making, you really study it in the context of the business culture. And if you're looking for a center point or a center around which all of the discussions and conversations concerning business ethics will normally take place, it's in the setting of the business culture. And when we do that, we try to, at least I, when I teach my ethics courses, I try to focus on what happens when you leave home and you're one person and you're dealing with your family and everybody knows you in that setting and you're a member of your house of worship and you come into a business cultural setting. What happens to people under those circumstances? And that's been my focus over the years in ethics. I have not taken what a lot of people do in ethics and say, here's a rule, how do you abide by that rule? I think that's part of ethics. But what I've focused on over the last few years is why do good people, when they come into organizations, make bad decisions? And it's that study of ethics, I think, that's very important to business people. So when we look at ethics, it's in the context of a corporation or an organizational culture. And when you focus there, then you begin to think in terms of how does a manager who comes into a business create an environment as a manager, because that's their responsibility. How do they create an environment in a business culture where ethics is not just something that's thought of as a sidelight, where it becomes part of the culture, it becomes part of how they do things and how they think. And that leadership comes from the top. That comes from the people who are in the managerial settings. The board, the officers, the managers, they all have to be sensitized to ethics. And that's what happened in an organization like Enron. I mean, these people may have started out as dysfunctional people, but my experience is that most of the people who make bad ethical decisions and who are continuing to make them are really not bad, they're not criminals at heart. They're not bad people. They get into a place where pressures take place, other considerations come in on them, and they make bad ethical decisions. And to me, that's the best way a business school can approach the question of ethics.
Let's continue with this distinction that you're making between ethics in business and just ethics in ordinary life. It seems to me that the two must dovetail significantly. Like, behaving ethically in the home involves being honest and taking ownership in the decisions that you've made, you know, whether it was being impulsive and buying something that you couldn't afford, you know, and now you've hurt your family. There must be a lot of overlap in your mind between what behaving ethically in the family means and behaving ethically in an organization.
Sure, there is. I mean, ideally, assuming you're starting out with an ethical person, you're not starting out with somebody who's dysfunctional. But ideally, the same person who does a great job as a parent at home and instills ethical virtues, really, in the children, and who goes to the house of worship and everybody says he's a wonderful guy. Ideally, that person would be the same functioning person in the organizational culture. But the ideal isn't reality. What happens to some, not to everybody, but what happens to some people is that they, and I use this term when I teach my class, there's been a resurgence of psychological literature and studying in the area of ethics, especially in my profession as a lawyer, because when Enron happened and when WorldCom happened, the question that everybody asked was, where were the lawyers? Where were they? How could they let this kind of thing happen? And the same thing is true with accountants. We call those people now in my profession and in business ethics, we call them gatekeepers. These are the people who keep the gate in the organizations. Well, the gatekeepers flat out failed during those years. And one of the reasons they fail, and one of the reasons I found, and I saw it in my cases over the years, because I saw good people doing very bad things. And I asked the question, how can this occur? Psychologists will tell us, and this sounds, I don't want to get too theoretical, but psychologists will tell us that there's a thing called role differentiation, where the role you play at home may not be the role you play in that organization. So if you start out with that risk, that psychological risk, then you have to say to yourself, what happens in the organization that forces you or allows you or pushes you in a direction that you're role differentiating, that you are different from the people who knew you at home. And that to me is the most important study of ethics for business people and business cultures. So when you say they mesh, yeah, ideally they mesh, but the reality is that the people who have driven these corporations in a bad direction, they don't mesh. They're very different people at work than they are at home. And most of the time, the cases that you read, the stories that you read, these are otherwise good people. I had them in my cases. I mean, I had a classic case one time where people falsified repair records for airline parts. And the falsification would have resulted in an engine of a plane blowing apart in the air, catastrophically killing hundreds of people. When I went behind the people who did that, I talked to people, I said, do you know the person who signed and falsified this tag? Consistent response was, oh, I know him. He's a great guy. He's a father. He's a deacon in our church. This is the same guy. When he went into the corporation, falsified a yellow tag that put at risk the lives of hundreds of people. And you have to ask yourself, and that's what I've asked myself over the years, why? How does this person make transition from point A to point B? So ideally, that's a long answer, but ideally you're right. They should mesh. But what we see and what I've seen happening over the years is that they split apart. Yeah. They're very different tracks that people follow.
Economists like myself would say that some of what we're seeing in terms of behaviors that are unethical are just issues of incentives. That if you were to change the incentives within a firm or an organization, you could get much different behavior. And here's an example. The incentives during the housing boom leading up to the financial crisis of 2008 were tremendous for mortgage brokers and for bankers just trying to get deals done. If they got deals done real quickly, the bonuses were going to be great. There was a lot of short-term money just out there. And it caused a lot of them to not look at credit reports, to just give money to people who were making $10,000 a year and just going on faith that these people could repay, offering products where the person was just going to be upside down in their mortgage. And in my mind, the incentives were just really messed up in some of these firms, encouraging people to just focus on the quick transaction. So when we talk about ethics, what role does incentives play, and then what role does what you're talking about, this deep commitment to core values, play? There must be some balance between the two.
That's my airline parts case. When I talked to the guy, and they were very candid with me, when I talked to the guy who falsified the yellow tags, the response I got was, our quality control manager said we had to get the product out so that we could get the revenue in. That's the story. I mean, that really is the story. But when you ask that question, and when you pose it that way, that leads us back to the central focus that I'm talking about, and that is the corporate culture. So today, because of Enron, there's a huge emphasis on having compliance and ethics programs. I've had cases where they had, on the wall, they had a very nice looking code of conduct, an ethics code of conduct. But the reality is, that wasn't part of what they did, and that wasn't part of how they operate. It looked good, it was up on a wall, but it wasn't who they were. So from the standpoint of a lawyer, from the standpoint of business people, you have to create a culture within your organization that really does two things, and most people don't think of it in this way. The good corporate culture will create incentives and things that people will follow and that will nurture people in organizations so that they will be good citizens within that community. But what you also want to do, and this is the very important component that I rarely hear people talk about, and that when I say it to business people, it really strikes a chord with them. Not only do you want to have a corporate culture that nurtures the good people and that says to them, we assume you're good. You're good and we are too. and you're going to be able to succeed in this organization by being good. You got to send that message in a business organization. But you also have to create an organizational culture where the bad guy, the fellow you haven't identified through your employment process, the person who is just sitting there waiting to be bad, and I'm overly generalizing, but the person who's sitting there waiting to be bad will ultimately look around and he'll say to himself, or she will say to himself, I'm not going to be able to do it here. This is not the kind of organization where I'm going to be able to succeed by being bad. So you want to create an organization that sends two messages to people. You can be good, and you are going to be able to succeed here. But if you're bad, this is not a home for you. Those are two very important dimensions to corporate culture. Now, that's only going to work if that message comes down from the top. And that's what happened in Enron. The message coming down from the top was poisonous. And it ate away the fabric of an organization, because people knew that if they were going to succeed in Enron, that's the kind of guy they wanted to model. What you have to have is an organization where they say, that's the kind of guy I want to model because he's a good guy.
Let's talk about this poisoning of an organization like Enron and what creating an ethical corporate environment might mean for a firm's bottom line. I would imagine a lot of firms think about doing good as being very costly. You know, when you have people who are treating one another fairly and they're not competing ruthlessly with each other, and you know, sometimes when you have an environment where they're not kind of undercutting another peer within the workplace, maybe you're sacrificing some profitability and some returns that could be enjoyed. So can behaving ethically be consistent with long-term value for your company? And here I have in mind an example, BB&T, the Southern Regional Bank, a very large bank now. Their CEO, prior to the financial crisis, John Allison, put in place a set of core values that really focused on, you know, integrity, on what's good for your client long term. So they didn't get into the business of putting people into mortgages where they were just going to be upside down. If the numbers didn't work on the front end, where you're upside down from the beginning of this thing, you shouldn't be selling that product to your customer because it's going to hurt them in the long term. And it seems like a nice example of ethical behavior being consistent with long-term profitability and a successful company. But can this be more general than an example like that, or an example like Whole Foods, which, you know, tries to do this you know, conscious capitalism?
Let me tell you two things.
Yep.
When I taught at another school, it was an MBA program. One of the students, and this kind of stuff we're talking about is what I taught. One of the students one day said to me, he said, you know, I've come to the conclusion that ethics and profits are mutually exclusive. Well, I was traumatized as a teacher. I was literally traumatized. But that was an opportunity for me then to really get into this. The fact of the matter is, if you want to look at statistics, the statistics that are coming out, and I don't think these are self-serving or biased statistics, the statistics that are coming out show that those corporations that are thought of as being ethical, in fact, are very profitable. They are doing well. And I think that comports with what you and I want out of a corporation. I do think that customers see that. And if they know they're being treated fairly, I think they respond. You don't have to say, hey, I'm an ethical company, deal with me. But profits and ethics are consistent with each other. It comes out, we're starting an entrepreneurship in Dothan, for instance, at our campus, entrepreneurship curriculum. One of the things, I wrote an article in the Dothan newspaper, one of the things I wrote about was that entrepreneurs have a unique and golden opportunity. They're starting a company, and they have a wonderful opportunity to start from scratch and build an ethical organization. Unique opportunities for entrepreneurs. One of the things you mentioned, you alluded to what lawyers and business people are now calling virtue ethics. And that comes from Aristotle. And the things that you mentioned are virtues. And what you want to do is to be able to make those virtues part of what you do. Because when people operate on those virtues, you don't have to tell them how to make a decision. They're making a decision from that perspective. The end decision which is a good result, will come from those virtues. So when I talk about organizational cultures, you've hit at the heart of it. Those are the virtues, and those are the things that you want to instill in your organization.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about another hat you wear. So you're teaching students about business ethics and writing columns related to ethical decision making, but you're also in the Dothan community reaching out and trying to engage with entrepreneurs and bring entrepreneurial education into some of our programs at Troy University. Can you talk a little bit about what the big picture vision is for this project?
I'll tell you why I was hired, for one thing. I mean, I'm a lawyer with 40-some years of litigation experience, but business people were my clients. And what I saw over the years was business people making very bad decisions. So when Dean Edwards and I talked, Judson Edwards is the Dean of the College of Business. When Dean Edwards and I talked, I told him that one of my goals was to establish an ethics center down on our Dothan campus. He said, great. He said, when you get down there, what I want you to do is talk to the business people and find out how you can make the College of Business relevant to that business community and beyond. And what happened was, when I got down to Dothan, I started doing that. I started meeting the business and the political leaders. And when I asked the question of them, I said, how can we make the College of Business relevant to you? The refrain I got back from everybody was entrepreneurship. And the reason for that is Dothan is an entrepreneurial city. So to begin an entrepreneurship focus on our campus, it's a natural fit. So we're not doing anything that's counterintuitive to our business and political leaders. The fact of the matter is we're doing everything that is intuitive to them and that what they want. So we're working on it for the 2013 catalog. We are now designing an entrepreneurship curriculum where we will be able to bring students in, teach them the skills of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship in many ways is intuitive. I mean, you don't take an introverted person generally and he's not going to become an entrepreneur. There's a certain entrepreneurial personality. But I think you can train people in entrepreneurial skills. They don't have to go out and start a business. We hope that those people, if they don't start a business, will go into the business where they work and bring that entrepreneurial thinking into that business. So what we're really doing is economic development. The fact of the matter is, entrepreneurship is a facet of economic development. And if you combine a campus that is focusing on entrepreneurship in a city that wants it, and that running along with that is not only entrepreneurial thinking, but ethical thinking. For instance, I'm going to be teaching a course in that entrepreneurship program that, for lack of a better term, it's called the Ethics and Law and Ethics of Competition. My focus will be to teach the students I'm teaching to go into the competitive environment with the knowledge of the law that constrains them, but also with the view that they have to compete ethically. If we can do that in Dothan, and you can do that in any course, it doesn't have to be in my course or any other course. If you can do that, then the entrepreneurs that we will get out of our program in Dothan will be well equipped to start those businesses that already have core values.
That's really exciting what you're doing there, and there's been some private money that's been put into trying to get the ball rolling on developing an entrepreneurship center, if I understand.
Hopefully, yes, there has been.
Yeah.
But the entrepreneurship program as we envision it is not just going to be sit up on a hill in academia. This is going to be a program that must involve mentors from the community. A very strong component of that program is going to be the business people in Dothan being willing to come in and help mentor our students. Dothan is a very interesting city. It's maybe 2 or 3 generations from the entrepreneurs who started it. I lived in Mobile for 27 years. Mobile is a very different city. It's a historic pre-Civil War city. Dothan didn't begin that way. Dothan began by entrepreneurs who started that city. We're maybe only 1, 2, or 3 generations from the people who began Dothan. And so these people in Dothan, the business community in Dothan, are well postured. They're entrepreneurs to begin with. So it's going to be a hand-in-hand combination of their efforts as entrepreneurs to help bring those skills to bear on our students as mentors, and us as academics to give them the appropriate skills, management, finance, where they can combine entrepreneurial thinking with business thinking. You put that combination together, and I think we will have a very, very good thing. That's not just going to benefit Dothan, that's going to benefit everybody. I mean, I hope our influence will be like a concentric circle that will move farther and farther out from Dothan. Yeah. And so we have nothing but high hopes to turn out good entrepreneurial students who think ethically.
Mm-hmm. We have time for about one more question, and I'm curious, given what we've talked about with ethics and entrepreneurship, if you have any views about why the entrepreneur outside of a business school is viewed with such disdain by folks in the movie industry. If you look at a lot of the villains on movies, they're often business people and entrepreneurs. If you look at what the media has to say about business people, and you know that elite 1% that is responsible for a lot of what's good in America, there's the 99% that are pretty hostile towards them. If you look at politicians, it's an easy group to attack and say, you know, they've gotten there unfairly. What's your view about what's behind all of this concern about the entrepreneur and his relationship to the rest of society?
I think the entrepreneur, or let's go beyond the entrepreneur. If you take the entrepreneur and you take the business person, they are embroiled in the political debate that's going on in this country now. The people who criticize the entrepreneurs and who criticize the business people, for some reason, and I don't get it historically, I just don't get it. I mean, I understand it intellectually, but I don't understand it emotionally. They are against people who want to make a profit. Why they think that way, why they feel that way is beyond me, because the American dream was built on this sense of individualism. The entrepreneur is the true individualist. But going back to, you have to get the entrepreneur thinking not just of himself, but of the culture that he produces. Other than the political debate, the huge tension that's going on in this country today that's symbolized by a presidential election, other than this political debate, I don't know why an entrepreneur would be the target for any criticism. It's the entrepreneur who made this country. And if we can get more of them out there, they will be developing the economy of this country. Companies that are big don't start out big. They started out with a dream. They started out with people getting together. So every company we see operated in the United States at one time or another began by an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, if anybody in this country, ought to be the subject of heaping of praise on him or her. They are the ones that are going to drive this economy. But they're caught up in a political debate.
Yeah, it's an ugly debate.
It's an ugly debate.
We'll see if it softens any after the fall.
Yeah.
It's been great having you on the show, and we're so excited about what you're doing on the Dothan campus and what you're doing to help promote the center, both there and just through your constant communications with us up here. Come on back, and we'll talk more.
I'll be back anytime you invite me.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Good night.